Hello, welcome to the channel. If you're a fan of scary creatures and chilling stories, subscribe to the channel to support us and follow the stories. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching this video from, all because the shrill ring of John Thorne's phone pierced the quiet of his small cabin, startling him from a fitful sleep. He fumbled for the device, his eyes struggling to focus on the bright screen in the darkness. The clock read 3:17 a.m. "Thorne here," he growled, his voice rough with sleep. "John, it's Captain Reeves. We've got a situation." The urgency in his superior's voice instantly cleared the fog from John's mind. "A hiker's gone missing in the high peaks. Last contact was about 6 hours ago. We need you on this one." John sat up, already reaching for the notepad he kept by his bed. "Give me the details." As Captain Reeves rattled off the information, John's hand moved across the page, jotting down key points. Male, 32 years old, experienced hiker, last known location near Mount Marcy. As he listened, a familiar knot began to form in the pit of his stomach. "John, you still there?" Reeves' voice cut through his thoughts. "Yeah, Cap, I'm on it. I'll head out within the hour." "Good, and John?" There was a pause. "Be careful out there. This one? It feels off." The line went dead, leaving John alone with the weight of those words. He sat for a moment staring at the phone in his hand, before shaking off the feeling of dread that threatened to overwhelm him. As he began to gear up, John's mind wandered to his last failed rescue, just 6 months ago. The images came unbidden. The broken body at the bottom of the ravine, the accusing eyes of the family, the whispers that maybe he was losing his edge. He clenched his jaw, pushing the memories aside. Not this time. This time would be different. John methodically checked his pack, ensuring he had all the necessary supplies for an extended search. As he worked, his eyes kept drifting to the framed photo on his bedside table. A younger version of himself, smiling alongside a woman with bright eyes and a radiant smile. Sarah, the one he couldn't save. "Not again," he muttered to himself, zipping up his jacket with more force than necessary. The drive to the ranger station was quick, the roads empty in the pre-dawn darkness. As John pulled into the parking lot, he saw a small group of people huddled near the entrance, the missing hiker's family. Taking a deep breath, John stepped out of his truck and approached them. A woman with red-rimmed eyes broke away from the group, clutching a cell phone to her chest. "Are you the search and rescue officer?" she asked, her voice trembling. John nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral, yet compassionate. "Yes, ma'am. I'm John Thorne. Can you tell me anything more about your—" He paused, realizing he didn't know the relationship. "My brother," she supplied. "Michael. He's an experienced hiker, Mr. Thorne. He wouldn't just disappear like this." "I understand," John said softly. "Can you show me the last communication you had with him?" The woman, Michael's sister, nodded and held out her phone. John took it, his eyes scanning the text messages until he reached the last one. There was a photo attached, and as John opened it, he felt a chill run down his spine. The image showed a serene mountain vista, bathed in the golden light of sunset. But there, at the edge of the frame, was something odd. A blur, almost like a tear in the fabric of the image itself. "He sent this right before—" Michael's sister trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. John handed the phone back, his mind racing. "Thank you. This will help. I promise you I'll do everything I can to find your brother." As he turned to go, the woman caught his arm. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes pleading, "please bring him back." The weight of her words settled on John's shoulders like a physical burden. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, and headed towards the trailhead. The forest was still dark as John began his ascent, the beam of his headlamp cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Under normal circumstances, John would have reveled in the solitude, the connection with nature. But today, every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, every rustle in the underbrush a possible clue. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the canopy, John reached a small clearing. He paused, taking a swig from his water bottle and surveying the area. That's when he saw it. The first set of footprints. John knelt down, examining the tracks closely. They were fresh, no more than a day old, and matched the description of Michael's hiking boots. But there was something off about them. The stride length was inconsistent, as if the person had been staggering or disoriented. "What happened to you out here, Michael?" John murmured, tracing the outline of a print with his finger. As he stood to continue following the trail, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, carrying with it a sound that made John's blood run cold. It was distant, barely audible, but unmistakable. A scream, cut short. John's hand went to his radio, but he hesitated. What would he report? A strange feeling? A sound that might have been the wind? He shook his head, deciding to press on. But as he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something far beyond his experience. The trail led John deeper into the wilderness, the terrain becoming increasingly difficult. The footprints he followed seemed to reflect the changing landscape, clear and purposeful at times, erratic and confused at others. It was as if Michael had been alternating between lucidity and something else. As the day wore on, John's unease grew. The forest around him seemed to be holding its breath, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. Even the light filtering through the trees took on an odd quality, as if he were seeing it through a slightly warped lens. "Get it together, Thorne," he muttered to himself, pausing to check his GPS. "You're letting this place get to you." But even as he tried to rationalize his feelings, John couldn't shake the sensation that he was being watched. He found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, searching for what? He couldn't say. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, John knew he'd have to make camp soon. But the urgency of the search drove him forward. Just a little further, he told himself, just over the next rise. It was then that John crested a small hill and found himself on the edge of a vast open field. The sudden exposure after hours in the dense forest was jarring. But what made John's breath catch in his throat was what he saw in the center of the field. The footprints he had been following so diligently led straight out into the tall grass. But about halfway across the open space, they simply stopped, as if Michael had taken one more step and then vanished into thin air. John stood frozen at the edge of the field, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. In all his years of search and rescue, he had never encountered anything like this. The logical part of his brain scrambled for explanations, a jump, a change in direction, anything to make sense of the impossible scene before him. But as the last light of day faded and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, John Thorne was forced to confront a chilling realization. This was no ordinary search and rescue mission. Whatever had happened to Michael in this field defied all rational explanation. And as night fell over the Adirondacks, John knew that his own journey was only just beginning. John Thorne stood at the edge of the field as dawn broke, his eyes fixed on the spot where the footprints abruptly ended. He had spent a restless night camped nearby, unable to shake the feeling of wrongness that permeated the air. As the morning mist began to dissipate, he shouldered his pack and stepped into the tall grass, determined to uncover the truth behind Michael's disappearance. The dew-laden blades of grass brushed against John's legs as he carefully made his way across the field, following the path of the vanished footprints. He moved slowly, eyes scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance or clue that might explain the inexplicable trail. As he neared the center of the field, John froze. There, barely visible among the grass, was a small metallic object. He crouched down, using a gloved hand to brush aside the vegetation. It was a compass, its needle spinning wildly, unable to settle on a direction. "What the hell?" John muttered, picking up the compass. He recognized it as the type favored by experienced hikers like Michael. The glass was intact and there were no signs of damage. Yet the needle continued its frantic dance, defying the laws of magnetism. John pocketed the compass and stood, his unease growing. The hair on the back of his neck prickled, and he felt as if unseen eyes were watching his every move. He turned in a slow circle, surveying the surrounding tree line. That's when he noticed it, a barely perceptible path leading into a particularly dense section of forest. With a deep breath, John set off towards the trees. As he entered the shadowy woodland, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The underbrush was thick, making progress slow and difficult. Strange, twisted vines curled around the trunks of ancient trees, their patterns almost resembling faces in the dappled light. After what felt like hours of struggling through the oppressive foliage, John emerged into a small clearing. At its center stood a dilapidated structure, an old ranger station long abandoned. Its windows were dark, empty sockets, and the wooden walls were covered in a thick layer of moss and lichen. John approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But the thought of Michael, lost and possibly injured, drove him forward. He reached for the door, its rusted hinges protesting loudly as he pushed it open. The interior of the station was a study in decay. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light that penetrated the gloom. Old furniture lay scattered about, broken and rotting, but it was the walls that captured John's attention. Every available surface was covered in strange, frantic scribblings. Pulling out his flashlight, John moved closer to examine the writings. Most were indecipherable, a chaotic mix of symbols and fragmented words. But here and there, phrases jumped out at him. The veil thins. They come through the cracks. Time is broken. A chill ran down John's spine as he read the disturbing messages. He was so engrossed in deciphering the wall that he almost missed the sound, a faint rhythmic tapping coming from deeper within the station. "Hello?" John called out, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Michael? Is someone there?" The tapping stopped abruptly. For a moment, silence reigned. Then a voice, dry and cracked, as if it hadn't been used in years, responded. "Ain't no Michael here, stranger, but you'd best be careful where you're steppin'. This here's the edge of the vanishing grounds." John whirled around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to illuminate a figure seated in the corner. The man was ancient, his face a web of deep wrinkles, his eyes milky with cataracts. He wore tattered clothes that might once have been a park ranger's uniform. "Who are you?" John asked, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. "What is this place?" The old man cackled, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "Name's Ezekiel, boy. Been here longer than I can rightly remember. As for what this place is..." He gestured vaguely with a gnarled hand. "It's where things slip through. Where the world ain't quite solid no more." John's mind raced, trying to make sense of the old man's words. "I'm looking for a missing hiker. Have you seen anyone come through here recently?" Ezekiel's blind eyes seemed to fix on John with uncanny precision. "Folks come through here all the time, boy, but they don't always leave. At least not the way they came in." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The vanishing grounds don't like to give up what they take." A cold knot of fear formed in John's stomach. "What do you mean? What happens to the people who come here?" The old man's face split in a toothless grin. "They go elsewhere. To when and where I couldn't say, but if you're fixing to follow, you'd best be prepared. The path ain't easy, and what's on the other side?" He trailed off, shaking his head. John took a step closer, desperation coloring his voice. "Please, I need to find him. How do I follow? Where do I go?" Ezekiel cocked his head, as if listening to something John couldn't hear. "The way'll open for you soon enough. But heed my warning, boy. Once you step through, there ain't no guarantee you'll find your way back." Before John could press for more information, a bone-chilling scream echoed through the forest, causing him to jump. It was unlike anything he had ever heard. Not quite human, not quite animal, but filled with a profound and terrible anguish. "What was that?" John gasped, his heart pounding. Ezekiel's expression grew grave. "That, boy, is the sound of something that don't belong. something that slipped through the cracks. He pointed a gnarled finger towards the door. If you've got any sense, you'll run now. Go back to your world of solid things and forget this place. But John knew he couldn't leave. Not without finding Michael, not without answers. I have to keep going, he said, more to himself than to Ezekiel. The old man nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. Then take this, he said, reaching into his tattered coat and pulling out a small, intricately carved wooden box. When the time comes, and you'll know when, open it. Might be the only thing that'll see you through. John hesitated for a moment before accepting the box. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and warm to the touch. Thank you, he said, tucking it into his pack. As he turned to leave, Ezekiel's voice stopped him one last time. Remember, boy, in the Vanishing Grounds, nothing is as it seems. Trust your instincts, not your eyes. With those cryptic words echoing in his mind, John stepped back out into the forest. The scream had faded, but the air itself seemed charged with an otherworldly energy. As he moved deeper into the woods, following some instinct he couldn't name, John couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a path from which there might be no return. The trees around him seemed to twist and writhe, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, always disappearing when he turned to look directly at them. And through it all, a faint whisper seemed to carry on the wind, repeating a single chilling phrase. The door is opening. The door is opening. The door is opening. John Thorne, seasoned search and rescue officer, found himself on the threshold of something beyond his understanding. As he pressed on into the heart of the Vanishing Grounds, he knew that his search for Michael had become something far more profound, a journey into the unknown, where the very fabric of reality hung in the balance. John Thorne pushed through the dense underbrush, his clothes damp with sweat and clinging to his skin. The forest had grown increasingly bizarre as he ventured deeper into what Ezekiel had called the Vanishing Grounds. Trees twisted into impossible shapes, their bark shimmering with an oily iridescence. Flowers bloomed and withered in seconds, their petals shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors. As he stumbled into a small clearing, John's eyes widened in disbelief. Before him stood a series of standing stones arranged in a perfect circle. Each stone was easily twice his height, covered in swirling patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. At the center of the circle lay a pool of water so still it resembled a mirror, reflecting the turbulent sky above. John approached the pool cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the wooden box Ezekiel had given him. As he neared the water's edge, he caught sight of his reflection and gasped. The face staring back at him was his own, but older, lined with years he hadn't yet lived. As he watched, transfixed, the reflection shifted, showing him younger, then older again, cycling through the ages in a dizzying display. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice sounding strange and distorted in the unnatural stillness of the clearing. As if in response to his question, a sudden wind whipped through the stones, carrying with it whispers in 1,000 voices. John strained to make out the words, catching fragments that made his blood run cold. The boundary thins. Worlds collide. Time unravels. The wind died as quickly as it had come, leaving John alone with the eerie silence once more. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog of confusion that seemed to be settling over his mind. He had to focus. He had to find Michael. Just as he was about to turn away from the pool, a movement caught his eye. There, reflected in the water, was a figure, not his own distorted image, but someone else entirely, someone he recognized. "Michael?" John called out, his voice cracking with a mixture of hope and fear. The figure in the pool turned, revealing the face of the missing hiker. But something was wrong. Michael's eyes were wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. He seemed to be trying to say something, gesturing frantically. John leaned closer, trying to make out what Michael was saying. Suddenly a hand burst from the surface of the pool, grabbing John's wrist with impossible strength. He cried out in shock and pain as he was pulled off balance, toppling headfirst into the water. Instead of the expected impact and rush of cold, John found himself falling through empty space. Colors swirled around him, fragmenting and reforming in nauseating patterns. He tumbled through what felt like an eternity of chaos before slamming hard onto solid ground. Groaning, John pushed himself to his knees, his head spinning. As his vision cleared, he realized he was no longer in the forest. Instead, he found himself in a vast open field, the same field where he had first lost Michael's trail. But everything was wrong. The sky above was a sickly green, crisscrossed with pulsing veins of energy. The grass beneath his feet was gray and brittle, crumbling to ash at his touch. "Hello?" John called out, his voice echoing strangely in the alien landscape. "Michael? Is anyone there?" A figure appeared on the horizon, shambling towards him with an uneven gait. As it drew closer, John's hope turned to horror. It was Michael, or what was left of him. The hiker's skin was pale and translucent, his eyes sunken and glowing with an unnatural light. When he spoke, his voice was a raspy whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "John, you shouldn't have come. You can't be here. It's not safe." John took a step back, his hand going to the knife at his belt. "Michael, what happened to you? What is this place?" Michael's laugh was a dry, brittle sound. This is the space between, the void where realities bleed into one another. I've been here I don't know. Time doesn't work right here. I don't understand," John said, struggling to process what he was seeing and hearing. "How did you end up here? How do we get back?" Michael's form seemed to flicker, like a faulty hologram. "I followed the lights, thought I'd found something amazing, but it was a trap. This place, it feeds on us, on our memories, our essence. The longer you stay, the less of you remains." A chill ran down John's spine as he remembered Ezekiel's warnings. "There has to be a way out. I came here to rescue you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." Michael shook his head sadly. "It's too late for me, John. I've been here too long. But you might still have a chance. You need to find the Nexus Point. It's the only way back." "Nexus Point? What's that? Where do I find it?" John asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Before Michael could answer, the ground beneath them began to tremble. In the distance, a massive shape rose from the horizon, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, defying description and sanity alike. "It's coming," Michael hissed, his form beginning to dissolve. "Run, John. Find the Nexus. And whatever you do, don't let it catch you. Don't let it—" Michael's warning was cut short as his body crumbled into ash, scattered by a sudden foul wind. John stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by shock and grief. The ground shook again, more violently this time, snapping him back to the present danger. Without a clear direction, John ran. He sprinted across the ashen field, his lungs burning as he gulped in the thin, acrid air. Behind him, he could hear the thunderous approach of the cosmic horror he had glimpsed. Each of its footfalls sent shockwaves through the ground, nearly throwing John off his feet. As he ran, the landscape around him began to shift and change. One moment he was in the field, the next he was running through a twisted version of New York City, its skyscrapers bent at impossible angles. Then he was in a desert of blue sand under three suns, then an icy tundra where the snow fell upwards. Reality itself seemed to be fracturing around him, but John pressed on. His mind raced, trying to make sense of Michael's final words. What was the Nexus Point? How would he recognize it? Just as his strength was about to give out, John spotted something in the distance, a pillar of swirling light, stretching from the ground to the turbulent sky above. Somehow, he knew this was what he was looking for, the Nexus Point, his way home. With the last of his energy, John sprinted towards the light. He could feel the hot breath of the cosmic horror on his heels, reality warping and tearing around him. As he reached the pillar, he remembered the box Ezekiel had given him. Without thinking, he pulled it from his pack and wrenched it open. A blinding light erupted from the box, enveloping John in a cocoon of pure energy. He felt himself being lifted, pulled towards the nexus point. The last thing he saw before consciousness left him was the furious, incomprehensible face of the horror that had almost claimed him, roaring in defeat as John slipped beyond its reach. When John opened his eyes again, he found himself back in the clearing with the standing stones. The pool of water rippled gently, reflecting a normal sky above. His clothes were dry and there was no sign of the horrors he had witnessed. But as John struggled to his feet, he knew that his ordeal was far from over. He had glimpsed a reality beyond understanding, a threat to the very fabric of existence. And somewhere in that swirling chaos, Michael and who knew how many others were still trapped. With shaking hands, John pulled out his radio. It crackled to life, a sound so wonderfully normal it almost brought tears to his eyes. "This is Search and Rescue Officer John Thorne," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to report a situation unlike anything we've ever dealt with before." As John began to explain what he had experienced, he knew that his life would never be the same. The search for Michael had become something far greater, a mission to save not just one life, but perhaps all of reality itself. And as the sun began to set over the Adirondacks, casting long shadows through the standing stones, John Thorne steeled himself for the challenges that lay ahead. The boundary between worlds was thinning, and he now stood as one of the few who could defend it. John Thorne's radio crackled with static as he finished his report. The silence that followed was deafening, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Captain Reeves's voice came through, thick with concern and barely concealed skepticism. "John, are you feeling all right? What you're describing, it's—" "I know how it sounds, Cap," John interrupted, his voice hoarse. "But I'm telling you, every word is true. We're dealing with something way beyond our usual scope here." There was another long pause before Reeves spoke again. "Okay, John, I'm sending a team to your location. Sit tight and don't do anything else until they arrive. Do you understand?" John nodded, forgetting for a moment that Reeves couldn't see him. "Yeah, Cap, I understand." As the radio fell silent, John slumped against one of the standing stones, exhaustion finally catching up with him. The adrenaline that had been coursing through his veins was fading, leaving him feeling hollow and drained. He closed his eyes just for a moment, and immediately regretted it, as images from the other side flooded his mind. Michael's distorted form, the horrifying creature that had pursued him, the fractured landscapes he'd run through. A twig snapped nearby, jolting John back to full alertness. His hand went to his knife as he scanned the area, half expecting to see some nightmarish entity emerging from the shadows. Instead, he saw a young woman making her way cautiously into the clearing. She was dressed in hiking gear, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, the standing stones, the mirror-like pool, and John himself looking worse for wear. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "I thought I heard voices. Are you with Search and Rescue?" John nodded, slowly getting to his feet. "I am. John Thorne. Who are you and what are you doing out here?" The woman approached, relief evident on her face. "I'm Dr. Emily Carter. I'm a physicist from MIT. I've been studying some unusual phenomena in this area." She paused, giving John a closer look. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." A humorless chuckle escaped John's lips. "A ghost? I wish it was that simple." He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something in Dr. Carter's demeanor, the way she'd mentioned unusual phenomena, made him take a chance. "What kind of phenomena are you studying exactly?" Emily's eyes lit up with excitement. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Temporal anomalies, spatial distortions, energy readings that defy all known laws of physics. It's like reality itself is thin here." John felt a chill run down his spine at her words, so eerily similar to what he'd experienced. "Try me," he said. "I've seen some things today that I can't explain." things that shouldn't be possible. For the next half hour, John and Emily exchanged stories. He told her about Michael's disappearance, the end of the footprints, his encounter with Ezekiel, and his terrifying journey to the other side. In turn, she shared her research, pulling out a tablet to show him graphs and charts that meant little to John, but seemed to support his experiences. "This is incredible," Emily said, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "Your account matches perfectly with my theories. The thinning of dimensional barriers, the bleeding of realities. John, do you realize what this means?" Before he could respond, a new voice cut through the clearing. "It means you're both in way over your heads." John and Emily turned to see a man emerge from the tree line. He was tall and lean, dressed in a black suit that seemed wildly out of place in the wilderness. His eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, but his mouth was set in a grim line. "Who are you?" John demanded, instinctively moving to place himself between the newcomer and Emily. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Agent Thomas Clark, Department of Temporal Affairs. A department I'm quite sure you've never heard of, Mr. Thorne." Emily stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Temporal Affairs? Are you saying the government knows about all of this?" Clark nodded. "We've been monitoring the situation for years. The anomalies have been growing stronger, more frequent. What Mr. Thorne experienced today is just the tip of the iceberg." John's mind reeled with this new information. "So you know about the other side? About the things that are over there?" "We know more than you can imagine," Clark said. "And we know how dangerous it is. That's why I'm here. To contain the situation and ensure that what you've seen doesn't spread." There was something in Clark's tone that set John on edge. "Contain the situation? What exactly does that mean?" Clark's hand moved to his jacket, and John tensed, expecting him to draw a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a small device about the size of a cell phone. "It means that sometimes, for the greater good, certain memories need to be adjusted." Emily gasped. "You're going to erase our memories? You can't do that. The world needs to know about this." "The world isn't ready," Clark said firmly. "Knowledge of what exists beyond our reality would cause panic, chaos. We can't allow that." John's mind raced, looking for a way out of this situation. He thought of Michael, still trapped on the other side, of the cosmic horror he'd glimpsed. How many others had been lost? How many more would be if this was all covered up? In a split-second decision, John lunged forward, knocking the device from Clark's hand. "Run!" he shouted to Emily, already sprinting towards the tree line. He heard Clark curse behind him, followed by the sound of pursuit. John's exhaustion was forgotten, replaced by a surge of desperate energy. He couldn't let this end here. Couldn't let the truth be buried. As they ran, the forest around them seemed to come alive. Shadows deepened and twisted. Branches reached out as if trying to grab them. John realized with a start that the boundary was thinning again, reality bleeding through. "This way," Emily called out, veering to the left. John followed, trusting her knowledge of the area. They burst out of the forest onto a rocky outcropping overlooking a steep ravine. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. In the distance, John could see the lights of approaching vehicles, the backup Reeves had promised. "We're trapped," Emily panted, looking around frantically for an escape route. John turned to face the forest, ready to make a last stand. But what emerged wasn't Clark. Instead, the trees parted to reveal a shimmering portal, like a tear in the fabric of reality itself. "No," John whispered, recognizing it for what it was, a gateway to the other side. Emily grabbed his arm. "John, we have to go through. It's our only chance." He hesitated, remembering the horrors he'd witnessed. But the sound of Clark's voice, closer now, made the decision for him. "Together," John said, gripping Emily's hand tightly. They shared one last look at the world they knew before stepping into the unknown, the portal closing behind them, just as Clark reached the clearing. As reality warped and shifted around them, John realized that their journey was only beginning. They were now fugitives, not just from Clark and his agency, but from the very laws of nature themselves. Whatever lay ahead, John knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The world spun in a kaleidoscope of impossible colors as John and Emily tumbled through the portal. For what felt like an eternity, they fell through a void where the concepts of up and down, left and right, ceased to have meaning. Just when John thought he couldn't bear it any longer, they crashed onto solid ground. Groaning, John pushed himself up, his head spinning. "Emily, are you okay?" "I think so," came her shaky reply. Where are we?" As their vision cleared, they found themselves in a landscape that defied comprehension. The sky above was a swirling mass of purples and greens, occasionally split by arcs of energy that resembled lightning, but moved in slow motion. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with an inner light, and in the distance, mountains floated impossibly in midair, their peaks disappearing into swirling mists. "We're on the other side," John said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is where I ended up before, but it's different somehow." Emily stood, brushing off her clothes. Her scientific curiosity seemed to overcome her fear as she looked around in wonder. "It's incredible. The laws of physics as we know them clearly don't apply here. Look." She pointed to a nearby tree, if it could be called that. It resembled a tree in basic shape, but its leaves were crystalline structures that chimed softly in a non-existent breeze. As they watched, the tree slowly uprooted itself and began to walk away on root-like appendages. "We need to be careful," John warned, remembering his previous experience. "There are things here, things that don't take kindly to visitors." As if on cue, a low, rumbling growl echoed across the landscape. John and Emily froze, eyes darting around for the source of the sound. "What was that?" Emily whispered, edging closer to John. Before he could answer, the ground in front of them erupted. A creature burst forth, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, vaguely reminiscent of the horror John had encountered during his first visit, but smaller, more focused. Its body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and when it spoke, its voice reverberated directly in their minds. "Intruders!" it boomed. "You do not belong here." John stepped forward, placing himself between the creature and Emily. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're looking for someone, a man named Michael. Have you seen him?" The creature's many eyes blinked in an unsettling rhythm. "Many come, few remain themselves. The one you seek may no longer be who he was." Emily spoke up, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "What is this place? How does it exist alongside our reality?" "Your questions are meaningless," the creature responded. "This realm exists in the spaces between. It is everywhere and nowhere." John's mind raced, trying to process the information while also looking for a way out of this confrontation. "You said Michael might not be himself anymore. What did you mean by that?" The creature's form rippled, tentacles writhing. "This place changes all who linger. Flesh, mind, soul, all become one with the void." A chill ran down John's spine as he remembered Michael's distorted form from his previous visit. Is there a way to reverse it? To bring someone back? "There is always a way," the creature intoned. "But the price may be more than you are willing to pay." Suddenly, the air around them began to shimmer and distort. The creature's many eyes widened in what looked like alarm. "The boundary thins," it said. "Others come. You must hide." Before John or Emily could react, one of the creature's tentacles wrapped around them both. There was a sensation of movement, of reality bending around them, and then they found themselves in a dark, cavern-like space. As their eyes adjusted to the dimness, they realized they weren't alone. Humanoid figures huddled in the shadows, their forms flickering and distorting like bad television reception. One of the figures approached, its features slowly solidifying into a familiar face. "Michael?" John gasped. The figure that had once been Michael smiled, but the expression was wrong somehow, too wide and filled with too many teeth. "John? Is that really you? How long has it been?" Emily stepped forward, her scientific mind already analyzing the situation. Michael, do you remember how you got here? What happened to you? Michael's form flickered, briefly showing the horrific transformations he had undergone before stabilizing again. Time doesn't work right here. I've been here for minutes, for centuries. I followed the lights, thought I'd found something amazing. But it was a trap. This place, it feeds on us, on our memories, our essence. John felt a pang of guilt. I'm so sorry, Michael. I came here to rescue you, and I promise I'll find a way to get you home. Michael's laugh was a dry, brittle sound. Home? I'm not sure I even remember what that means anymore. And even if I did, look at me, John. How could I ever go back like this? Before John could respond, a commotion from the cavern entrance caught their attention. The tentacled creature that had brought them there was engaged in what looked like a heated argument with several new arrivals. With a start, John recognized one of them, Agent Clark, from the Department of Temporal Affairs. Somehow he had followed them through the portal. We need to move, John whispered urgently. If Clark finds us here, who knows what he'll do? Emily nodded, her face set with determination. But we can't leave Michael and the others. There has to be a way to help them. Michael's form flickered again, and when he spoke, his voice sounded more lucid than before. There might be a way. The nexus point. The heart of this realm. If we could reach it, we might be able to reverse what's been done. But it's dangerous. The closer you get to the nexus, the more this place tries to change you. John looked at Emily, seeing his own resolve mirrored in her eyes. Then that's where we need to go. Michael, can you lead us there? Michael nodded, his form stabilizing slightly. I can try, but we'll need to be careful. The Veil Walkers, that's what we call the beings like the one that brought you here. They guard the paths to the nexus jealously. As if on cue, Clark's voice echoed through the cavern. I know you're in here, Thorn. Come out now, and I promise we can work this out. Liar, John muttered under his breath. To the others, he said, All right, we need to move. Michael, lead the way. Emily, stay close. As they slipped deeper into the twisting passages of the cavern, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were embarking on a journey from which there might be no return. The laws of reality no longer applied, and danger lurked around every corner. But as he glanced at Emily's determined face and Michael's flickering form, he knew they had no choice. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever horrors they might face, they had to press on. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps countless others, hung in the balance. With one last look over his shoulder at the approaching threat, John steeled himself for what was to come. The journey to the nexus point had begun, and with it, a race against time, physics, and the very fabric of reality itself. The group moved swiftly through the twisting corridors of the cavern, their path illuminated by the soft, bioluminescent glow emanating from the walls. John led the way, with Emily close behind, and Michael's flickering form bringing up the rear. The sound of pursuit echoed distantly behind them, spurring them to move faster. As they ran, the cavern began to change around them. The walls pulsed with alien life, and occasionally, a section would simply cease to exist, revealing glimpses of other impossible landscapes before solidifying again. Emily stumbled as the floor beneath her feet suddenly became gelatinous, only to firm up again a moment later. This place is incredible, she gasped, her scientific curiosity warring with her fear. It's as if reality itself is in flux. Stay focused, John warned, helping her regain her balance. We can marvel at the impossibilities later, if we survive. Michael's voice drifted to them, sounding distant despite his proximity. The Nexus is affecting the environment more strongly now. We're getting closer, but the dangers will only increase. As if to punctuate his words, a section of the ceiling suddenly liquefied, raining down a substance that looked like mercury but hissed and steamed when it touched the ground. John pulled Emily out of the way just in time, the strange liquid missing them by inches. Thanks, Emily said, her eyes wide. I don't think our physics would have much to say about that. They pressed on, The landscape growing increasingly bizarre with each step. Gravity began to fluctuate wildly. One moment they were running normally, the next they were practically floating, and then they were struggling against a force that made each step feel like moving through molasses. Suddenly Michael called out, "Wait, stop here for a moment, we need to be careful about our next move." They halted in what appeared to be a vast chamber. The ceiling, if there was one, was lost in a swirling mist far above. Strange crystalline structures jutted from the ground, each one reflecting a different impossible scene. Cityscapes that defied Euclidean geometry, oceans of fire, forests where the trees were made of pure math. "What is this place?" John asked, his voice hushed with awe and trepidation. Michael's form stabilized slightly as he explained. "This is the crossroads of realities. Each of these crystals is a window, or perhaps a door, to another layer of existence. The nexus point lies beyond, but choosing the wrong path could scatter us across dimensions." Emily approached one of the crystals, her hand outstretched. "Fascinating. It's like looking at the multiverse theory made manifest. But how do we know which path to take?" Before Michael could answer, a new voice rang out, echoing strangely in the vast chamber. "You don't. That's what makes this place so delightfully treacherous." They spun to see a figure emerging from the mists. It was humanoid in shape, but its features were constantly shifting, as if unable to decide on a single form. When it smiled, its teeth were visible through its cheeks. What are you?" John demanded, instinctively placing himself between the newcomer and his companions. The figure's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Who? What? Such limited concepts you bring to this place of infinite possibility. I am the guardian of the crossroads, the keeper of ways, the—" "Enough with the titles," John interrupted, his patience wearing thin. "Are you here to help us or stop us?" The guardian's form rippled with amusement. "Neither. Both. I am here to offer a choice, as I must to all who reach this point. You seek the nexus, yes? To undo what has been done, to set right what has gone wrong?" Emily stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Can you show us the way?" "Show you? Oh no, my dear, that would be far too simple." The guardian chuckled. "But I can offer you a chance. 3 paths lie before you, each leading to a different facet of the nexus. Choose correctly, and you may find what you seek. Choose poorly, and well, let's just say the multiverse is always hungry for new possibilities." John felt a chill run down his spine. "And how are we supposed to choose? You said yourself we don't know which path is right." The guardian's form solidified briefly into something almost human, its eyes glinting with an alien intelligence. "Ah, but that's the beauty of it. You must choose based on who you are, on what drives you. The soldier, the scientist, and the lost soul." It pointed to John, Emily, and Michael in turn. "Each path resonates with one of you. Choose wisely, and trust in yourselves." With that, the guardian vanished, leaving behind only a lingering echo of its laughter. The group stood in stunned silence for a moment before Emily spoke up. "Well, that was cryptic. But I think I understand. Each path must correspond to our individual strengths or perspectives." John nodded slowly, his mind racing. "Okay, so we need to figure out which path suits each of us best. But what happens if we choose wrong?" Michael's form flickered anxiously. "Based on what I've seen in this realm, I'd guess we'd be scattered across different realities. We might cease to exist as we know ourselves, become something other." "No pressure then," John muttered. He took a deep breath, surveying the 3 crystalline archways that had appeared before them. Each pulsed with a different energy, one red and fierce, one blue and serene, one green and ever-shifting. Emily approached the blue archway, her eyes alight with curiosity. "This one, it feels right to me, like it's calling to my desire to understand, to unravel the mysteries of the universe." Michael drifted towards the green arch, his form becoming more stable as he neared it. and this one resonates with me. It's like it understands what I've become, the changes I've undergone. That left the red archway for John. As he stood before it, he felt a surge of determination, of the drive to protect and persevere that had defined his career in search and rescue. "I guess this one's mine then," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. They stood before their chosen paths, each hesitating on the threshold of the unknown. The sound of pursuit, momentarily forgotten, grew louder in the distance. "We don't have much time," John said urgently. "Whatever lies beyond these archways, we have to face it. For Michael, for everyone trapped in this place, and for the safety of our own world." Emily reached out and squeezed his hand. "Together then? On 3? John nodded, grateful for her steady presence. "Together. Michael, are you ready?" Michael's form solidified further, a look of determination settling on his features. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this." They counted down together, their voices echoing in the vast chamber. 3, 2, 1. With a collective deep breath, they stepped through their chosen archways. The world around them exploded into light and sensation, reality twisting and reforming in ways that defied comprehension. As John felt himself being pulled apart and reassembled, one thought burned in his mind. Had they chosen correctly? Or had they just consigned themselves to a fate worse than death in the infinite possibilities of the multiverse? The answer, he realized, as consciousness began to slip away, lay in whatever reality awaited them on the other side of their choice. John Thorne blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus. The world around him was a kaleidoscope of red hues, pulsating with an energy that seemed to resonate with his very being. He found himself standing on what appeared to be a narrow bridge made of crystalline light, suspended over an endless void of swirling crimson mists. "Emily? Michael?" he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the vast space. There was no response. As the disorientation faded, John's training kicked in. He took stock of his surroundings, looking for any signs of danger or a way forward. The bridge stretched out before him, twisting and turning through the void. In the distance, he could see what looked like floating islands, each one a fragment of a different reality. Taking a deep breath, John started moving forward. Each step sent ripples through the bridge, as if it were responding to his presence. As he walked, he noticed that the mists around him were forming shapes, vague outlines of people and places from his past. "Your path is one of action, of protection," a voice whispered from the mists. It sounded like the guardian of the crossroads, but distorted, as if coming from multiple directions at once. "But what drives you, John Thorne? What are you truly fighting for?" John gritted his teeth, pressing forward. "I'm here to save Michael, to stop whatever's happening to our world." The mists swirled more intensely, and suddenly John found himself surrounded by ghostly images of past rescues, people he'd saved, and some he couldn't. The faces of those he'd lost stared at him accusingly. "Are you, though?" the voice questioned. "Or are you running from your failures, seeking redemption in this impossible quest?" John faltered for a moment, the weight of his past pressing down on him. But then he straightened, a new determination in his eyes. "Maybe I am," he admitted to the void. "But that doesn't make this mission any less important. I'm here because it's the right thing to do, regardless of my personal demons." The mists seemed to retreat slightly, and the bridge before him solidified. As John continued his journey, he found himself facing physical manifestations of his doubts and fears. Shadowy creatures lunged at him from the void, each one taking the form of a challenge he'd faced in his past. John fought his way through, relying on his training and instincts. With each obstacle he overcame, he felt a surge of energy, as if the very fabric of this reality was responding to his will. After what felt like hours of traversing the twisting bridge, John finally reached one of the floating islands. As he stepped onto solid ground, the world around him shimmered and changed. He found himself in a familiar setting, the search and rescue headquarters back in the Adirondacks, But something was off. The colors were too vivid, the details too sharp. And seated at his desk was himself. Another John Thorne, but older, more weathered, with eyes that held a haunted look. The other John looked up, unsurprised. "So, you finally made it," he said, his voice a gravelly version of John's own. "Took you long enough." John approached cautiously. "Who are you? What is this place?" His doppelganger chuckled humorlessly. "I'm you, of course. Or rather, I'm who you could become. This," he gestured around, "is a glimpse of a possible future. One where you never took the leap, never followed Michael into the void." John's mind reeled. "But how? Why am I seeing this?" "Because you need to understand the consequences of your choices," the other John said, standing up. "In this reality, you played it safe. You reported the anomaly, let the authorities handle it, and now—" He trailed off, his eyes distant. "And now what?" John pressed. His doppelganger's face twisted with pain. "And now the world is falling apart. The barriers between realities are collapsing. We're fighting a losing battle against forces we barely understand." John felt a chill run down his spine. "So, by trying to play it safe, we actually made things worse?" "Exactly," the other John nodded. "Sometimes the right path isn't the safe one. Sometimes you have to take the leap into the unknown." As his words faded, the office around them began to dissolve, replaced by swirling red mists once again. John found himself back on the crystal bridge, but now he could see a destination ahead, a swirling vortex of energy that he instinctively knew was the nexus point. "This is your final test, John Thorne," the Guardian's voice echoed around him. "You've faced your past and glimpsed a possible future. Now you must decide. Will you press on, knowing the risks, or will you turn back?" John stood at the threshold, the swirling energy of the nexus point beckoning. He thought of Emily and Michael, wondering if they were facing similar trials in their own paths. He thought of the world he'd left behind, of Agent Clark and the forces that sought to keep these realities separate. Finally, he thought of the other John, the one who had played it safe and lived to regret it. With a deep breath, John stepped forward. "I choose to continue," he declared to the void. "Whatever challenges lie ahead, whatever sacrifices must be made, I'm ready." The vortex of energy surged towards him, enveloping him in a cocoon of pure power. John felt himself being torn apart and remade, his consciousness expanding to encompass realities he could never have imagined. As he was pulled into the heart of the Nexus, one last whisper reached his ears, the Guardian's voice, tinged with what almost sounded like pride. "Well chosen, soldier of realities. May your courage light the way." Then everything went white, and John Thorne ceased to be, at least in any form he would have recognized. His journey through the red path had transformed him, preparing him for whatever lay at the heart of the Nexus. As his consciousness reformed, new understanding flooded his mind. He could sense Emily and Michael, their own journeys through their chosen paths having transformed them as well. Together, yet separate, they converged on the true heart of the anomaly, the point where all realities intersected. And there, in that impossible space between worlds, the final battle for the fate of all existence would be fought. John, or what he had become, readied himself for the challenge ahead, knowing that everything he had faced up to this point had been merely a prelude. The true test was yet to come, and the stakes could not have been higher. In the heart of the Nexus, where realities collided and the very fabric of existence trembled, three beings of pure energy coalesced. They were no longer simply John, Emily, and Michael, but something more, avatars of their essential selves, transformed by their journeys through the paths of the soldier, the scientist, and the lost soul. John's consciousness, a swirling vortex of red energy tinged with determination and courage, reached out to the others. "Emily? Michael? Are you still you?" The blue spark that was Emily pulsed in response, her voice resonating not through sound but through pure thought. I'm here, John, but I'm more than I was. The things I've seen, the knowledge I've gained, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. The green wisp that had once been Michael flickered uncertainly. I'm here too, I think, but I'm not sure what here means anymore, or what I means for that matter. As they communed, the space around them shifted and warped. They found themselves in a vast chamber that seemed to exist in all realities simultaneously. The walls, if they could be called that, were a constantly shifting tapestry of possible worlds and timelines. In the center of the chamber stood a structure that defied description, a geometrically impossible object that pulsed with the combined energy of all existence. This, they knew instinctively, was the true heart of the Nexus, the linchpin holding all realities together. But something was wrong. The structure was cracked, leaking energy into the void, and wrapped around it, like a parasite draining its host, was a writhing mass of darkness. What is that thing? John's essence recoiled at the sight. Emily's energy field expanded as she analyzed the scene. It's feeding off the Nexus, draining the energy that maintains the boundaries between realities. If it isn't stopped, then all of existence will collapse, Michael finished, his form stabilizing slightly in the face of this threat. Before they could decide on a course of action, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. Well, well, looks like you made it after all. I have to admit I'm impressed. Agent Clark materialized before them, but like them, he was changed. His form flickered between human and something else, something ancient and powerful. Clark, John's essence flared with recognition. What have you done? The being that had been Clark laughed, the sound sending ripples through the fabric of reality. What have I done? I've seized power beyond your comprehension. For years, my agency has known about the Nexus, about the potential it held. We thought we could control it, use it to shape reality to our whims. But we were thinking too small. Emily's blue energy crackled with realization. You're not trying to seal the boundaries between worlds. You're trying to destroy them completely. Give the lady a prize, Clark sneered. Why settle for one reality when you can have them all? Imagine it, a new existence with no boundaries, no limits, and at the center of it all, you. Michael's green wisp pulsed with disgust. You'd sacrifice everything, everyone just for power? Clark's form grew, tendrils of darkness spreading out from him to merge with the mass engulfing the Nexus. Power. This is beyond power. This is becoming a god. The chamber shuddered, realities bleeding into one another more rapidly. John could sense the panic and confusion emanating from countless worlds as the boundaries between them began to crumble. We have to stop him, John declared, his essence burning with resolve. But how? Emily's energy field expanded, interfacing with the chamber around them. The Nexus, it's the key. If we can repair it, strengthen the boundaries, but that would trap us here, Michael realized. We'd have to sacrifice our connection to our own reality. A moment of hesitation passed between them. The weight of the choice before them was immense. To save all of existence, they would have to give up any chance of returning to their own lives, their own world. John's essence flared with determination. I made my choice when I stepped through that portal. Whatever it takes, we have to make this right. Emily's blue energy pulsed in agreement. For science, for knowledge, for the infinite possibilities of existence, I'm in. Michael's green wisp stabilized further, resolve strengthening his form. I've been lost for so long. If I can find purpose in this last act, then let's do it. As one, they surged towards the heart of the Nexus. Clark's darkness lashed out at them, tendrils of void trying to tear them apart. But they pressed on, their combined essences burning through the corruption. You fools! Clark's voice boomed, shaking the foundations of reality. You can't stop this. You can't stop me. John's red energy formed a shield, deflecting Clark's attacks. Maybe not, but we can sure as hell try. Emily's blue essence interfaced with the Nexus structure, her vast knowledge allowing her to understand its workings. I think I know how to repair it, but we'll need to act as conduits, channel the energy of all realities through ourselves. Michael's green form wrapped around the cracks in the nexus. Whatever you need, just tell us what to do. As Clark howled in rage, launching a final desperate assault, the three beings who had once been John, Emily, and Michael positioned themselves around the nexus. They opened themselves up, becoming living bridges between all points of existence. Energy beyond imagination poured through them. They felt the lives of countless beings, the weight of infinite possibilities. It was ecstasy and agony, creation and destruction, all at once. In that eternal moment, as realities realigned and boundaries reasserted themselves, they caught glimpses of the worlds they were saving. Families reunited, civilizations continuing, lives unfolding in all their beautiful, chaotic glory. Clark's form began to disintegrate, spread too thin across the re-establishing boundaries. No, you can't. I was so close. His final scream was lost in the maelstrom of energy as the nexus flared with blinding light. The chamber shuddered one last time, and then silence. In the restored heart of the nexus, three beings of pure energy hovered. They were no longer quite John, Emily, and Michael, but they weren't quite not them either. They had become something new, guardians of the boundaries between worlds. As the last echoes of their monumental act faded, Emily's essence pulsed with a mixture of awe and sadness. It's done. The boundaries are restored, but we can never go back, John finished, his red energy swirling with complex emotions. Michael's green form, now stable and purposeful, expanded comfortingly. But look at what we've accomplished. Every life, every world, we've saved them all. As they contemplated their new existence, they became aware of a presence around them, the gratitude of countless realities, the silent thanks of beings who would never know how close they had come to oblivion. In that moment, watching over the infinite tapestry of existence they had saved, the beings who had once been John, Emily, and Michael found a new kind of peace. Their journey had led them here, to a purpose greater than they could have ever imagined. And as they settled into their role as the new guardians of reality, they knew that their greatest adventure was only just beginning. Time had lost all meaning in the heart of the nexus. For what might have been moments or millennia, the beings that had once been John, Emily, and Michael existed in a state of pure awareness, overseeing the delicate balance of infinite realities. Their essences had merged with the very fabric of existence, allowing them to perceive and influence the cosmic tapestry in ways beyond mortal comprehension. But even in this state of transcendent being, echoes of their former selves remained. It was these echoes that stirred when a new disturbance rippled through the multiverse. John's crimson essence pulsed with alarm. Do you feel that? Something's wrong. Emily's blue energy field expanded, analyzing the disturbance. It's coming from our original reality, Earth. The boundary there is fluctuating. Michael's now stable green form swirled anxiously. But how? We sealed the rifts. We restored the balance. As they focused their collective consciousness on their home reality, a familiar presence made itself known. The guardian of the crossroads materialized before them, its ever-shifting form more defined than they had ever seen it. Well done, little guardians. The guardian's voice resonated through the nexus. You've played your parts admirably. But did you really think it would be that simple? John's essence flared with frustration. What do you mean? We stopped Clark. We saved the multiverse. The guardian's laughter echoed across realities. Oh, you stopped one threat, certainly. But the story is far from over. Your actions have set greater wheels in motion. Emily's energy crackled with curiosity and concern. What's happening to Earth? To our reality? Your noble sacrifice has not gone unnoticed, the Guardian explained, its form rippling with barely contained power. Word has spread across the cosmos. Earth, The reality that produced beings capable of such an act has become interesting to forces beyond your comprehension. Michael's green essence pulsed with realization. We've painted a target on our own world. The Guardian nodded, or at least gave the impression of nodding in its ethereal form. Precisely. And now you face a choice. Remain here as the impartial guardians you've become, or risk everything to save the world you left behind. The three beings that had once been human communed silently, their essences intertwining as they weighed their options. Finally, John's red energy surged forward. We can't abandon Earth, not after everything we've sacrificed to save it. Emily's blue form pulsed in agreement. But how can we help? We're bound to the Nexus now. We've evolved beyond our physical forms. The Guardian's ever-shifting visage seemed to smile. Are you so sure about that? Remember, in the realm of infinite possibilities, nothing is truly impossible. With a gesture, the Guardian opened a window in the fabric of reality. Through it, they could see Earth, but not as they remembered it. Strange, otherworldly structures now dotted the landscape. The sky was a swirling mass of unnatural colors, and beings that defied description walked among bewildered humans. Your world stands at a crossroads, the Guardian explained. The knowledge of other realities has leaked through, drawing the attention of cosmic entities and interdimensional beings. Some seek to study, some to conquer, some simply to experience a new realm of existence. But the fabric of your reality was not meant to withstand such incursions. Michael's essence trembled with a mixture of fear and determination. We have to go back. We have to set things right. But we're not human anymore. Emily's energy field fluctuated with uncertainty. How can we possibly return? The Guardian's form expanded, encompassing them all. You've become more than you were, it's true, but the essence of who you are remains. I can send you back, give you physical form once more. But be warned, you will be changed by your experiences here. You will have knowledge and abilities beyond normal humans, but you will also face dangers beyond imagining. John's crimson energy flared with resolve. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we have to try. Earth is our home. We can't abandon it. Emily and Michael's essences pulsed in agreement. The Guardian nodded, its form beginning to glow with intense power. Very well, but remember, young Guardians, the multiverse is vast and full of wonders and horrors alike. The fate of your world now rests in your hands. Are you truly ready for what lies ahead? The three beings communed one last time, their essences intertwining in a silent pact. Then, as one, they surged forward. We're ready, they declared in unison. The Guardian's power enveloped them, and reality itself seemed to twist and warp. They felt themselves being compressed, reshaped, their vast cosmic awareness being funneled back into something resembling human form. As the process neared completion, the Guardian's voice echoed one last time through their consciousness. Good luck, Guardians of Earth. The greatest test is yet to come. With a flash of blinding light and a sensation of falling through infinite space, John, Emily, and Michael found themselves back on solid ground. They gasped, the simple act of breathing feeling foreign after their time as pure energy. As their vision cleared, they took in their surroundings. They were standing in the middle of Times Square in New York City. But it was a Times Square unlike anything they had ever seen. The iconic billboards now displayed incomprehensible alien script, and beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowded streets alongside stunned-looking humans. John looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers experimentally. He looked human, felt human, but there was an underlying current of power thrumming through his veins. He could sense the ebb and flow of reality around him in a way he never could before. Are we really back? Emily asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intelligence, taking in every detail of their transformed world with scientific curiosity and growing concern. Michael nodded, his form now solid but with a slight green shimmer to his skin. We're back. But everything's changed. We've changed. As they stood there, trying to acclimate to their new forms and the altered world around them, a commotion nearby caught their attention. A group of humans was confronting a tall, multi-limbed alien being, fear and anger evident in their voices. "We have to do something," John said, his old instincts kicking in despite his transformation. Emily nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to understand what's happened here. Find out how far the incursions have spread." Michael's eyes glowed faintly as he focused on the confrontation. "And we need to find a way to bridge the gap between humans and these new arrivals. There's so much fear, so much potential for conflict." As they moved towards the growing disturbance, each of them felt the weight of their new responsibility settling on their shoulders. They were no longer just John, Emily, and Michael. They were the guardians of Earth, returned from the heart of the multiverse to protect their home from threats beyond imagination. The story that had begun with a set of vanishing footprints in the Adirondacks had evolved into something far greater. Now, standing at the crossroads of realities, the true test of their courage, wisdom, and humanity was about to begin. With determined steps, the three guardians walked into the chaos of their transformed world, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest to save Earth and maintain the delicate balance of the multiverse. John, Emily, and Michael moved swiftly through the crowded streets of the transformed Times Square, their enhanced senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of sights, sounds, and sensations that assaulted them. The confrontation they had spotted was escalating rapidly, with a group of terrified and angry humans facing off against a towering, multi-limbed alien being. As they approached, John raised his hand, instinctively channeling the energy he could now feel coursing through him. A shimmering red barrier materialized between the two groups, startling both humans and alien alike. "Everyone, please calm down," John called out, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to resonate on a subatomic level. "We're here to help." The humans turned to look at the newcomers, their expressions a mixture of fear, confusion, and desperate hope. One man, his face etched with lines of stress, stepped forward. "Who are you? Are you with them?" he demanded, gesturing at the alien. Emily stepped up, her blue eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intelligence. "We're from Earth, just like you, but we've been away for a while. Can you tell us what's happened here?" The man laughed bitterly. "What's happened? The world's gone mad. That's what's happened. About 6 months ago, the sky tore open. These things started appearing everywhere. Some of them say they come in peace to study us or trade. Others..." He trailed off, shuddering. Michael, his skin still shimmering with a faint green hue, turned to the alien. "And you? Why are you here?" The being's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, and when it spoke, its voice was a harmonious blend of tones. "I am Zix Tari, a scholar from the Andromeda Collective. We came seeking knowledge, to learn from this reality that produced beings capable of stabilizing the cosmic nexus. We mean no harm." John lowered the energy barrier, sensing no immediate threat from Zix Tari. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding on both sides. We need to find a way to facilitate communication and understanding." As they worked to calm the situation, a new commotion arose from down the street. A sleek black vehicle with government markings screeched to a halt nearby, and a team of armed agents poured out, led by a familiar face. "Well, well, well," came a voice that made John's newly enhanced senses tingle with warning. "Look who's decided to rejoin us mere mortals." Agent Clark strode towards them, looking much as he had when they'd last seen him on Earth, but with a hardness in his eyes that spoke of the struggles of the past 6 months. "Clark," John acknowledged, his voice tight. "I see you've managed to hold on to some semblance of authority." Clark's laugh was harsh. "Someone had to step up and deal with this mess you left behind. The Department of Temporal Affairs has been working overtime trying to maintain some sort of order in this chaos." Emily's eyes narrowed as she analyzed Clark. "You're not surprised to see us. You knew we'd come back. Let's just say we've been monitoring certain anomalies, Clark replied cryptically. Now why don't you three come with us? We have a lot to discuss. Michael stepped forward, his green aura flaring slightly. We're not going anywhere with you until we understand what's really going on here. Clark's hand moved to his weapon, but John was faster. With a thought, he created a localized time dilation field, slowing Clark and his agents to a near standstill. We don't have time for this, John said to his companions. We need to find out what's really happening, and fast. Emily nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. We should seek out other extraterrestrial beings, get a broader perspective on the situation. And we need to connect with regular people, Michael added. Understand how they're coping with these changes. As they discussed their next move, a new voice cut through the air, accompanied by a shimmer of golden light. Perhaps I can be of assistance, said a being that seemed to phase into existence before them. It appeared humanoid, but was composed entirely of swirling golden energy. I am Aeon, an envoy from the Cosmic Council. We've been watching your Earth with great interest. John released the time dilation field, allowing Clark and his agents to return to normal speed, but kept a wary eye on them. Cosmic Council? What's that? Aeon's form rippled as it spoke. We are an assembly of higher dimensional beings who oversee the balance of the multiverse. Your actions at the Nexus drew our attention, and we've been monitoring the situation here closely. Emily's scientific curiosity was piqued. Are you responsible for the incursions? For all these beings coming to Earth? Aeon shook its head, or at least gave that impression. Not directly. Your actions created a ripple effect across realities. Earth has become a nexus point of its own, a crossroads of infinite possibilities. Many have come seeking knowledge, adventure, or other objectives. Michael frowned. But why not intervene? Surely you could have prevented this chaos. It is not our place to directly interfere, Aeon explained, but we can guide. That is why I'm here, to offer you assistance in your quest to protect your world. Clark, having regained his composure, interjected. Now wait just a minute. Earth's protection is our responsibility. We don't need some cosmic beings interfering. John turned to Clark, his expression stern. Like it or not, Clark, this is bigger than your department now. We need all the help we can get. As the group argued, the sky above New York suddenly darkened. A massive shape began to materialize over the city, blotting out the sun. Panic erupted in the streets as humans and aliens alike looked up in terror. What is that? Emily gasped, her enhanced senses struggling to comprehend the scale of the object appearing above them. Aeon's golden form flickered with what might have been concern. That, I'm afraid, is why I'm here. The Harbinger has arrived. The Harbinger? Michael asked, a sense of dread settling over him. Aeon nodded gravely. A cosmic entity of immense power. It travels from reality to reality, seeking out nexus points like Earth has become. And when it finds them... The being didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear in the fear that radiated from its golden form. John squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of responsibility settling upon him once more. Then we stop it, whatever it takes. Emily and Michael nodded in agreement, their own powers flaring in response to the threat. Clark looked between the three transformed humans, the golden cosmic being, and the looming threat in the sky. For a moment, his tough exterior cracked, revealing the overwhelmed man beneath. I don't suppose you have a plan? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. John's eyes glowed with determination as he gazed up at the materializing threat. We're going to save our world, Clark, one way or another. As the shadow of the Harbinger fell over New York, John, Emily, and Michael prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. They had returned to Earth as its guardians, and now the time had come to prove worthy of that title. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and the fate of not just their world, but perhaps the entire multiverse, hung in the balance. John tumbled through the ethereal vortex, his mind reeling from the kaleidoscope of colors and sensations assaulting his senses. Time and space lost all meaning as he fell, the device that was meant to close the rifts now nothing more than a useless hunk of metal in his hand. After what felt like an eternity, John landed with a thud on a surface that felt both solid and fluid, like a river of glass. As he struggled to his feet, John surveyed his surroundings. The sky above him was a sickly green, with dark clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. The landscape before him was a twisted mockery of the Adirondacks he knew so well. Trees bent at impossible angles, their branches reaching out like grasping claws. The mountains in the distance seemed to pulsate and shift, as if they were alive and breathing. "Where the hell am I?" John muttered, his voice sounding muffled in the strange atmosphere. "You're in the in-between," a voice answered from behind him. John spun around, reaching for his weapon, only to find it missing. Standing before him was a figure that looked like the missing hiker he'd been searching for, but something was terribly wrong. The hiker's eyes were pitch black and his skin had a sickly, translucent quality to it. "Welcome to the place where the lost souls wander," the hiker said, his voice echoing with an unnatural resonance. "You're one of us now." John shook his head, refusing to believe what he was seeing. "No, this can't be real. I have to find a way back to close the rifts before it's too late." The hiker laughed, a sound that sent chills down John's spine. "There is no going back, not from here. The rifts are just the beginning. You've stumbled into something far greater, far more terrifying than you could ever imagine." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a deafening roar filled the air. John turned to see a monstrous creature emerging from the pulsating mountains, its form a nightmarish amalgamation of flesh and rock. The hiker's eyes widened in terror, and he grabbed John's arm, pulling him away. "Run!" he screamed. "It's the Devourer, the apex predator of this twisted realm. If it catches us, we'll be worse than dead." John and the hiker ran through the distorted landscape, dodging grasping branches and leaping over chasms that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The Devourer pursued them relentlessly, its footsteps shaking the ground and its roar echoing in their ears. As they ran, John spotted other figures in the distance, some human, others decidedly not. A group of 3 individuals, 2 men and a woman, seemed to be fighting off a swarm of smaller insectoid creatures. John veered towards them, the hiker close on his heels. "We have to help them," John shouted, picking up a twisted branch to use as a makeshift weapon. Together, John and the hiker fought their way through the swarm, the other survivors joining them in their desperate battle. When the last of the creatures lay twitching on the ground, the group huddled together, catching their breath. "Who are you people?" John asked, looking at the ragtag group of survivors. The woman, who wore tattered clothing that looked like it was from the 1800s, spoke first. "I'm Elizabeth. I've been trapped here for I don't even know how long. Time has no meaning in this place." The 2 men introduced themselves as Robert, a World War II soldier, and Takeshi, a Japanese samurai from the 1600s. They had all been pulled into this nightmarish dimension through the rifts, just like John. As the group shared their stories, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were all trapped in a realm where the laws of physics and logic held no sway, pursued by creatures beyond their worst nightmares. But John refused to give up hope. "There has to be a way to close the rifts, to set things right," he insisted. "I've seen it from the other side. If we can find the nexus point of this dimension, maybe we can find a way to shut it down." The others looked at him skeptically, but Elizabeth nodded. "I've heard whispers of such a place, a point where all the madness converges. But the journey there is perilous, and many have tried and failed." John stood tall, a determined look in his eyes. "We have to try. We can't let this chaos bleed into our world any longer. Even if it means sacrificing ourselves, we have to find a way to stop it." The group exchanged glances, each grappling with the enormity of the task before them. Finally, Robert spoke. "I'm in." I didn't fight my way through the beaches of Normandy just to let some interdimensional hellhole get the best of me. Takeshi nodded solemnly. I will lend my blade to this cause. My honor demands no less. Elizabeth took John's hand, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. We'll do this together. We'll find the nexus point and put an end to this nightmare once and for all. With a newfound sense of purpose, the group set out into the twisted landscape, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The fate of two worlds now rested on their shoulders, and failure was not an option. As they trudged through the nightmarish terrain, John's thoughts turned to Sarah and the others back in his own dimension. He knew they were fighting just as hard to close the rifts from their side. He could only hope that somehow they would find a way to succeed, no matter the cost. The journey ahead would test their sanity, their strength, and their very humanity. But for John and his newfound allies, there was no turning back. They would see this through to the end, even if it meant sacrificing everything they held dear. And so, with grim determination, they pressed on into the heart of the in-between, ready to face the source of the chaos that threatened to tear reality apart. Sarah stared at the map of the Adirondacks spread out before her, a sense of dread settling in the pit of her stomach. The red circles marking the locations of the strange phenomena seemed to mock her, a testament to how little they truly understood about the situation. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice sounding strained even to her own ears. Dr. Evelyn Chen, the lead scientist from the facility, stepped into the room, her face etched with concern. "Sarah, I think we need to talk." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, I can't help but feel like we're running out of time. John's out there somewhere, trapped in God knows what kind of nightmare, and we're still no closer to figuring out how to bring him back." Evelyn placed a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We're doing everything we can, Sarah. But you're right, we need to face the truth about what we're dealing with here." Sarah turned to face the scientist, her eyes searching. "What do you mean?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment as if gathering her courage. Project Threshold. It wasn't just about interdimensional travel. We were trying to harness the power of the rifts, to use them as a weapon. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "A weapon? Are you serious? How could you even think of something like that?" "I wasn't in charge of the project," Evelyn said defensively. "I was just a researcher. But the higher-ups, they saw an opportunity, a way to gain an advantage over our enemies. They thought they could control it." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "But they couldn't, could they? And now John and God knows how many others are paying the price for their hubris." Evelyn looked away, shame written across her features. "You're right. We played with forces we didn't understand, and now we're all suffering the consequences." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted outside the room. She and Evelyn rushed to the window, peering out at the scene unfolding in the street below. A group of armed men, clad in black tactical gear, were making their way through the town, weapons drawn. They moved with a sense of purpose, as if they knew exactly where they were going. "Oh my God," Evelyn breathed. "It's them. The rival faction. They must have tracked us here." Sarah's heart raced as she watched the men advance. "What do they want?" "The device," Evelyn said grimly. "The one John used to try to close the rifts. They think they can use it to control the anomalies, to turn them into a weapon." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process the implications of Evelyn's words. If the rival faction got their hands on the device, there was no telling what kind of destruction they could unleash. "We have to stop them," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We can't let them get the device." Evelyn nodded, her face set with resolve. "I'll alert the others. We need to evacuate the town, get the civilians to safety." As Evelyn rushed out of the room, Sarah turned back to the map, her eyes drawn to the red circles once more. She knew that the key to saving John and stopping the rival faction lay somewhere in those anomalies. A sudden realization struck her, and she grabbed a marker, circling a specific location on the map. "The meadow," she whispered. "That's where it all started. That's where we need to go." Sarah gathered her gear, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous, that she might not come back. But she also knew that she couldn't turn away, not when so much was at stake. As she stepped out into the chaos of the town, Sarah's resolve hardened. She would find a way to save John, to stop the rival faction, and to put an end to the nightmare that had engulfed their world. The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance, a harsh reminder of the battle to come. Sarah gripped her weapon tightly, ready to face whatever lay ahead. "Hold on, John," she whispered, a silent prayer to the man she loved. "I'm coming for you. I won't let you down." With a deep breath, Sarah set out into the heart of the anomalies, ready to confront the truth that had been hidden for so long. The fate of their world, and of the man she loved, now rested on her shoulders. As she moved through the streets, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, a presence that lurked just beyond the edges of her perception. She knew that the rifts were growing, that the boundaries between worlds were weakening with every passing moment. But she also knew that she couldn't let fear hold her back. Not now, not when everything depended on her actions in the coming hours. Sarah's mind drifted to John, to the moments they had shared before the world had gone to hell. She remembered his smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. She remembered the warmth of his touch, the strength of his embrace. Those memories fueled her now, driving her forward even as the world crumbled around her. She would find him, no matter the cost. She would bring him back from the brink, and together they would put an end to the nightmare that threatened to consume them all. The road ahead was uncertain, the dangers untold. But Sarah knew that she had no choice but to press on, to face the truth that had been buried for so long. For in the heart of the anomalies lay the key to their salvation, and Sarah would stop at nothing to claim it. John and his unlikely companions trudged through the twisted landscape of the in-between, each step a battle against the unnatural terrain. The air hung heavy with a sense of foreboding, as if the very fabric of this realm was watching their every move. "We need to find shelter," Elizabeth said, her voice strained with exhaustion. "We can't keep going like this, not without rest." John nodded, his own body aching with fatigue. "Agreed. But where? Everything in this place seems designed to kill us." Takeshi the samurai pointed towards a distant structure, its form shimmering like a mirage in the sickly green light. "There. A temple, or something like it. It may offer respite from the horrors of this place." Robert, the World War II soldier, snorted. "Or it could be a trap, designed to lure us in and finish us off." John considered their options, his mind racing. They couldn't keep wandering aimlessly, not if they hoped to find the nexus point and close the rifts. But Robert was right. The temple could be a trap. "We'll approach cautiously," John said, making his decision. "But we need to take the chance. We're no good to anyone if we collapse from exhaustion." As they drew closer to the temple, the air seemed to grow thicker, the very atmosphere pressing down on them like a physical weight. John's skin crawled with the sense that they were being watched, that something ancient and malevolent was observing their every move. They reached the temple's entrance, a gaping maw of darkness that seemed to swallow the sickly light of the in-between. John hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But they had come too far to retreat now. "Stay alert," he warned, his voice low. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." The group stepped into the temple, the darkness enveloping them like a physical presence. The air was stale and thick with the stench of decay, and a deep, pulsing hum seemed to emanate from the very walls. Suddenly, torches burst to life along the walls, casting a flickering, eerie light across the chamber. In the center of the room stood a towering statue, its form a twisted amalgamation of man and beast. At its base, 3 doors loomed, each marked with a different symbol. "What now?" Robert asked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Elizabeth stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the symbols. "It's a test," she said, her voice filled with a strange certainty. "We must choose the right path, or face the consequences." John studied the symbols, his mind racing. One depicted a sword, another a mirror, and the third an hourglass. Each seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if daring them to make the wrong choice. "The sword," Takeshi said, his hand resting on the hilt of his own blade. "A warrior's path is always true." Robert shook his head. "No, the hourglass. Time is the one thing we can never escape, no matter what realm we find ourselves in." Elizabeth remained silent, her gaze fixed on the mirror. John looked to her, a question in his eyes. "The mirror," she said softly, "for it is only through facing our own reflections that we can hope to overcome the darkness within." John nodded, his decision made. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the door marked with the mirror. As his fingers brushed the surface, a blinding light filled the chamber, and the world fell away. John found himself standing in a vast, empty space. The ground beneath his feet a mirror that stretched out to infinity. Before him, his own reflection stared back, but it was wrong, twisted in a way that made his blood run cold. "You cannot escape your own darkness," the reflection said, its voice a distorted echo of John's own. "You will fail, as you always have. You are not strong enough to face the truth that lies ahead." John shook his head, his fists clenching at his sides. "No. I won't let my fears control me. I won't let the darkness win." He stepped forward, his reflection mirroring his every move. As they drew closer, the mirror began to crack, splintering into 1,000 shards. John's reflection shattered, falling away to reveal a glowing portal of light. John stepped through and found himself back in the temple, his companions by his side. They each bore the marks of their own trials, their faces etched with a new understanding. "We passed the test," Elizabeth said, her voice filled with wonder. "But what now?" As if in answer, the statue in the center of the room began to crumble, revealing a hidden passageway that led deeper into the temple. John exchanged glances with the others, a silent agreement passing between them. They had come this far, and they would see their journey through to the end, no matter the cost. For in the heart of the in-between lay the answers they sought, and the key to saving both their worlds. As they descended into the depths of the temple, John's thoughts turned to Sarah, and to the battles she must be facing in their own realm. He knew that their fates were intertwined, that they were fighting the same war on different fronts. "Hold on, Sarah," he whispered, his voice echoing in the darkness. "I'm coming home. I won't let you fight this battle alone." With renewed determination, John led his companions deeper into the heart of the in-between, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. For in the end, it was not just their own lives that hung in the balance, but the fate of all they held dear. And so, they pressed on, into the darkness and the unknown, each step a testament to the strength of their resolve, and the power of the human spirit to endure even in the face of the greatest horrors. Sarah burst into the command center, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The team of scientists and military personnel turned to face her, their expressions ranging from surprise to grim resolve. Dr. Evelyn Chen stepped forward, her face etched with concern. "Sarah, what's happening out there? We've been monitoring the anomalies, but the readings are off the charts." Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the task ahead. "It's worse than we thought. The rifts are growing and the rival faction is making their move. We need to act now before it's too late." Colonel James Wilder, the head of the military team, frowned. "What exactly are you proposing, Ranger? We can't just go charging into those anomalies without a plan." Sarah met his gaze, her eyes blazing with determination. "I have a plan. Dr. Chen and I have been working on decoding John's messages. He's found a way to close the rifts from the other side, but he needs our help." Evelyn nodded, picking up the thread. "Sarah's right. We've discovered that the rifts can be closed by activating the device simultaneously from both sides. If we can set up the device in the meadow, where the first rift appeared, and coordinate our efforts with John, we may be able to seal the breach once and for all. Colonel Wilder considered their words, his brow furrowed in thought. It's a risky plan, but I don't see any other options. We'll need to move fast before the rival faction can stop us. As the team began to mobilize, a sudden tremor shook the building, sending equipment crashing to the floor. Sarah grabbed onto a nearby desk for support, her eyes widening in shock. "What the hell was that?" Colonel Wilder demanded, his voice raised over the din of alarms. Dr. Chen rushed to a monitor, her face paling as she studied the readings. "The anomalies are surging. The two dimensions are beginning to merge, the boundaries between them breaking down. We're running out of time." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, the weight of their mission pressing down on her like a physical force. She thought of John, trapped in the nightmarish realm of the in-between, fighting for their very existence. "We have to go now," she said, her voice brooking no argument. "Every second we delay, the closer we come to losing everything." Colonel Wilder nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Agreed. We'll take a small team. Move fast and light. Dr. Chen, you'll coordinate from here. Keep us apprised of any changes in the anomalies." As the team geared up, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Evelyn, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "You can do this, Sarah," Evelyn said, her voice soft but firm. "You and John, you're our best hope. Just come back to us, okay?" Sarah clasped Evelyn's hand, a silent promise passing between them. "We will. We have to." The journey to the meadow was a blur of tense anticipation and heart-pounding adrenaline. As they approached the site of the first rift, Sarah could feel the energy pulsing in the air, a sickening twist of reality that set her teeth on edge. Colonel Wilder ordered the team to fan out, securing the perimeter as Sarah and Evelyn began to set up the device. The air crackled with static, the very fabric of space-time warping and bending around them. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire shattered the eerie stillness. Sarah whirled around, her weapon drawn, to see a group of armed men emerging from the tree line. The rival faction had found them. "Keep working," Colonel Wilder shouted, his own weapon blazing as he returned fire. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." Sarah turned back to the device, her hands shaking as she input the final coordinates. Beside her, Evelyn typed furiously on a keyboard, her face a mask of concentration. "Almost there," Evelyn muttered, her voice strained. "Just a few more seconds." A sudden cry of pain drew Sarah's attention, and she turned to see Colonel Wilder fall, clutching his shoulder. The rival faction was closing in, their weapons trained on the device. Sarah knew she had only one choice. She grabbed the device, her fingers closing around the activation switch. "Evelyn, tell John to be ready. We're doing this now." Evelyn nodded, her eyes wide with fear and understanding. "Godspeed, Sarah. I'll see you on the other side." Sarah took a deep breath and pressed the switch. The world exploded in a blinding flash of light, reality tearing apart at the seams. She felt herself falling, tumbling through an endless void of chaos and energy. When the light faded, Sarah found herself standing in a twisted, nightmarish landscape, the sky above her a sickly green. Before her, a swirling vortex of energy pulsed and writhed, the nexus point of the rifts. And there, at the heart of the maelstrom, stood John, his face a mask of grim determination. Their eyes met, a moment of silent communication passing between them. They had made it. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Sarah gripped her weapon tightly, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. For in this moment, she knew that she and John were the only things standing between their reality and utter annihilation. And they would not fail, no matter the cost. John stood at the nexus point, the swirling vortex of energy casting an eerie glow across his face. Behind him, Elizabeth, Robert, and Takeshi emerged from the temple, their expressions a mix of awe and terror. "Is that it?" Robert asked, his voice barely audible over the roar of the maelstrom. The heart of the in-between? John nodded, his gaze fixed on the pulsing energy before them. This is where it all converges. If we can find a way to shut it down, to sever the connection between our worlds, we might have a chance. Elizabeth stepped forward, her eyes wide with realization. The device. The one you used to try to close the rifts. It's linked to this place, isn't it? John reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the small metallic object. Yes, but it's damaged. I don't know if it will work. Takeshi placed a hand on John's shoulder, his expression one of grim determination. We have to try. There is no other way. As they approached the nexus point, a sudden wave of energy knocked them back, sending them sprawling to the ground. John struggled to his feet, his head ringing from the impact. Before them, the vortex began to shift and change, tendrils of darkness snaking out from its center. A figure emerged from the heart of the maelstrom, its form a twisted amalgamation of man and beast. You dare to challenge the power of the in-between? The figure roared, its voice a distorted echo of 1,000 tormented souls. You are nothing, mere specks in the face of the void. John stood tall, his voice ringing out with a strength he didn't know he possessed. We are not nothing. We are the guardians of our world, and we will not let you destroy it. The figure laughed, a sound that chilled John to the bone. Your world is already lost. The rifts cannot be closed. The boundaries cannot be restored. You fight a losing battle, John Thorne. John felt a flicker of doubt, a moment of weakness that threatened to overwhelm him. But then he thought of Sarah, of the battles she must be facing in their own realm. He thought of the people he had sworn to protect, the lives that hung in the balance. No, he said, his voice filled with a quiet determination. We will not surrender. We will fight until our last breath to defend what we hold dear. With a roar of defiance, John charged forward, the device clutched tightly in his hand. Elizabeth, Robert, and Takeshi followed, their weapons drawn and their faces set with grim resolve. The figure lashed out, tendrils of darkness whipping through the air like razor-sharp blades. John ducked and weaved, his reflexes honed by years of training. He could feel the energy of the nexus point pulsing around him, a sickening twist of reality that threatened to tear him apart. Elizabeth cried out in pain as a tendril grazed her arm, blood blossoming from the wound. Robert was there in an instant, his weapon blazing as he drove the darkness back. Takeshi danced through the maelstrom, his sword a blur of silver as he sliced through the tendrils with impossible speed. John pressed forward, the device in his hand pulsing with an energy that matched the nexus point. You cannot win, the figure roared, its form growing larger and more twisted with every passing second. I am the embodiment of chaos, the destroyer of worlds. John shook his head, a sad smile playing across his lips. No, you are the embodiment of fear, of the darkness that lies within us all. But we are stronger than our fears. We are the light that drives the darkness back. With a final desperate lunge, John plunged the device into the heart of the nexus point. The world exploded in a blinding flash of light, reality warping and twisting around them. John felt himself falling, tumbling through an endless void of energy and chaos. When the light faded, he found himself back in the meadow, the device clutched tightly in his hand. Before him, Sarah stood, her eyes wide with shock and relief. John, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. You did it. You closed the rifts. John stumbled forward, his body aching with exhaustion. Sarah caught him, her arms wrapping around him in a fierce embrace. We did it, he corrected, his voice soft. You and me, and all the others who fought beside us. We saved our world, Sarah. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. But the cost, so many lives lost, so much destruction. John held her tighter, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. I know. But we honor their sacrifice by living, by rebuilding what was lost. We carry on in their memory. As they stood there, holding each other in the midst of the devastation, John knew that their journey was far from over. The scars left by the rifts would take time to heal, the wounds inflicted on their world slow to mend. But they had each other, and the strength of their bond would see them through the trials ahead. For in the end, it was love that had saved them, the unbreakable connection between two hearts that refused to surrender, even in the face of the greatest darkness. And so, hand in hand, they walked forward into the uncertain future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they knew that together they could overcome anything and build a new world from the ashes of the old. As John and Sarah emerged from the meadow, the world around them was in chaos. The sky above was a swirling maelstrom of sickly green and inky black, the very fabric of reality twisting and warping as the dimensions continued to merge. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of battle, the crack of gunfire and the screams of the wounded. The rival faction, led by their possessed leader, was making a final, desperate push to seize control of the rifts, to harness their power for their own twisted ends. Sarah turned to John, her eyes filled with a grim determination. "We have to stop them. If they get their hands on the device, if they manage to reopen the rifts, it will all have been for nothing." John nodded, his jaw set with resolve. "I know. But we can't do it alone. We need help, Sarah. We need everyone who's left, everyone who's willing to stand and fight." Sarah reached out, her hand resting on the device that hung from John's belt. "The failsafe," she said, her voice soft. "Dr. Chen said it could close the rifts permanently, but the price—" John closed his eyes, his mind racing with the implications of what she was suggesting. The failsafe was a last resort, a final option that would seal the rifts forever, but at a terrible cost. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But if it comes to that, if there's no other way, I'll do what needs to be done." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but John silenced her with a gentle touch. "We don't have time to argue. We need to move now." As they raced towards the sounds of battle, they saw the full extent of the chaos that had engulfed their world. Buildings lay in ruins, the streets choked with rubble and the bodies of the fallen. In the distance, the rival factions' forces clashed with the remnants of the military, the air thick with the stench of blood and smoke. At the center of the maelstrom stood the possessed leader, his form twisted and distorted by the power of the rifts. He held aloft a shimmering orb, a device that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. "Behold," he cried, his voice a distorted echo of 1,000 tormented souls. "The key to ultimate power, the means to bend reality itself to my will." John and Sarah pushed their way through the chaos, their weapons drawn and their faces set with grim determination. They knew that they had only one chance, one final opportunity to end this nightmare once and for all. As they approached the possessed leader, a sudden blast of energy knocked them back, sending them sprawling to the ground. John struggled to his feet, his head ringing from the impact. "You cannot stop me," the leader roared, his form growing larger and more monstrous with every passing second. "I am the harbinger of a new age, the destroyer of worlds." John shook his head, a sad smile playing across his lips. "No, you are a puppet, a pawn in a game you don't even understand. The rifts, the in-between, they are not meant to be controlled, to be harnessed for power. They are a force of nature, a reflection of the chaos that lies at the heart of all things." The leader snarled, his eyes blazing with a madness that seemed to consume him from within. "You know nothing, John Thorne. You are a fool, a weakling who clings to the old ways, to the illusion of order and control. But I have seen the truth, and I will remake this world in my image." With a roar of defiance, the leader lashed out, tendrils of darkness whipping through the air like razor-sharp blades. John and Sarah ducked and weaved, their reflexes honed by years of training and the desperate struggle for survival. Around them, the battle raged on, the forces of the military and the rival faction clashing in a desperate, bloody struggle. John caught sight of Dr. Chen, her face a mask of concentration as she worked frantically to activate the failsafe. "John," she cried, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. "The device, it's ready. But you need to get clear, the blast radius." John nodded, his hand closing around the device at his belt. He turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with a desperate, aching love. "Sarah," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Sarah silenced him with a fierce, desperate kiss. "I know," she whispered, her forehead resting against his. "I love you, John Thorne. Always." With a final, agonized look, John turned and raced towards the heart of the maelstrom, the device clutched tightly in his hand. He could hear Sarah's voice behind him, screaming his name, begging him to come back. But he knew what he had to do. He had seen the terrible price that must be paid, the sacrifice that must be made to end this nightmare once and for all. As he reached the center of the chaos, John raised the device high, his voice ringing out with a clarity and strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep within him. "Enough," he cried, his words echoing across the battlefield. "This ends now. Forever." With a final defiant roar, John activated the failsafe, the device in his hand pulsing with an energy that seemed to consume him from within. The world exploded in a blinding flash of light, reality itself tearing apart at the seams. And then, there was only silence, a stillness that seemed to stretch out into eternity. Sarah stumbled through the wreckage, her heart pounding with a desperate, aching hope. But John was gone, consumed by the terrible power of the failsafe. The rifts were sealed, the dimensions separated once more, but the price had been paid in blood and sacrifice. Sarah fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as the weight of what had happened crashed down upon her. Around her, the survivors of the battle began to gather, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. But even in the midst of their sorrow, there was a flicker of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness. They had won, against all odds, and the world could begin to heal, to rebuild from the ashes of the nightmare that had nearly consumed them all. And though John was gone, his sacrifice would never be forgotten. His memory would live on in the hearts and minds of all those who had fought beside him, who had loved him. For in the end, it was love that had saved them all, the unbreakable bond between two souls that had refused to surrender, even in the face of the greatest darkness. And that love, that hope, would carry them forward, into a future that was theirs to shape, to make their own. In the aftermath of the final battle, Sarah stood amidst the ruins of the once thriving town, her heart heavy with grief and loss. Around her, the survivors worked tirelessly to clear the rubble and tend to the wounded, their faces etched with a weariness that seemed to reach down to their very souls. As she walked through the shattered streets, Sarah's mind was haunted by the memories of all that had been lost, of the brave men and women who had given their lives to stop the rifts and save their world. But most of all, she thought of John, of the man she had loved with all her heart, who had sacrificed himself to end the nightmare once and for all. "Sarah!" a voice called out, breaking through her reverie. She turned to see Dr. Chen hurrying towards her, a look of urgent excitement on her face. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Have you found something?" Dr. Chen nodded, holding up a battered journal that looked like it had been through hell and back. "It's John's," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I found it in the wreckage of the command center. And Sarah, there's something you need to see." With shaking hands, Sarah took the journal, her eyes scanning the pages with a desperate hunger. And there, amidst the scrawled notes and desperate plans, she found a message, written in John's unmistakable hand. "Sarah," it read, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the world is safe. But there's something you need to know, something I discovered in the final moments before the end. The rifts, the in-between, they're not just a force of destruction but a gateway to something more. And I believe that somewhere, somehow, I'm still out there, waiting for you to find me." Sarah's heart leapt in her chest, a desperate hope kindling in her soul. She turned to Dr. Chen, her eyes wide with a fierce determination. "We have to find him," she said, her voice ringing with a strength she hadn't felt in days. "If there's even a chance that John is still alive, still out there somewhere, then we have to try." Dr. Chen nodded, her own eyes shining with a newfound resolve. "I agree. But Sarah, we have to be careful. The rifts may be closed, but the in-between is still a dangerous place, and we don't know what we might be walking into." Sarah smiled, a sad, knowing smile that spoke of all the trials and hardships she had endured. "I know," she said softly. "But I also know that John would do the same for me, for any of us, and I won't let him down, not after everything he's done." As the two women began to plan their next move, a sudden commotion drew their attention. At the edge of the town, a group of survivors had gathered, their voices raised in a mixture of fear and excitement. "Look!" one of them cried, pointing towards the horizon. "Over there, in the woods." Sarah and Dr. Chen raced to the edge of the crowd, their hearts pounding with a desperate, aching hope. And there, just beyond the tree line, they saw a figure emerging from the mist, a figure that seemed to flicker and shift like a ghost in the early morning light. As the figure drew closer, Sarah's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening with a shock that bordered on disbelief. For there, walking towards them with a weary, stumbling gait, was John, his face haggard and his eyes haunted by a knowledge that seemed to reach beyond the veil of death itself. "John!" Sarah cried, racing forward to catch him as he stumbled, his body racked with exhaustion. How is this possible?" John smiled, a sad, knowing smile that spoke of the horrors he had witnessed, the trials he had endured. "The in-between," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just a place of darkness and chaos, but a realm of infinite possibility, and in the moment of my sacrifice I caught a glimpse of something more, a truth that reaches beyond the boundaries of our world." Sarah held him close, her tears falling like rain upon his battered face. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I thought you were gone forever." John shook his head, his eyes shining with a fierce, unbreakable love. "Never," he said softly. "I will always find my way back to you, Sarah, no matter what it takes, no matter what stands in our way." As the survivors gathered around them, their faces etched with a mixture of joy and disbelief, Sarah knew that their journey was far from over. The scars left by the rifts would take time to heal, the wounds inflicted upon their world slow to mend. But they had each other, and the strength of their love would see them through the trials ahead. For in the end, it was hope that had saved them, the unbreakable bond between two souls that had refused to surrender, even in the face of the greatest darkness. And as they stood there, holding each other amidst the ruins of their old life, Sarah and John knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, hand in hand, heart to heart. For they were the guardians of their world, the protectors of the light that shone in the darkness, and though the road ahead was long and the dangers many, they would never stop fighting, never stop believing in the power of love to conquer all. "So," Sarah said at last, her voice ringing with a newfound strength and determination, "what do we do now?" John smiled, his eyes shining with a fierce, unbreakable resolve. "We rebuild," he said simply. "We heal, and we never ever give up on each other or on the world we fought so hard to save." And with those words, they turned to face the future together, ready to meet whatever challenges lay ahead with courage, with hope, and with the unbreakable bond of their love to guide them forward into the light of a new dawn. In the days that followed John's miraculous return, the survivors worked tirelessly to rebuild their shattered world. Brick by brick, stone by stone, they labored to erect new homes, new businesses, new lives from the ashes of the old. But even as they worked, a sense of unease hung over the town like a pall, a shadow of the horrors they had endured and the sacrifices they had made. For though the rifts were closed and the in-between sealed away, the scars left by their ordeal ran deep, and the memories of all that had been lost lingered like ghosts in the corners of their minds. Sarah watched as John threw himself into the rebuilding efforts, his face etched with a grim determination that bordered on obsession. She knew that he was haunted by the knowledge he had gained in the in-between, by the glimpse he had caught of a truth that reached beyond the boundaries of their world. "John," she said softly, laying a hand on his arm as he worked to clear the rubble from what had once been the town square. "You need to rest. You've been pushing yourself too hard, and it's taking a toll." John shook his head, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and something more, something that Sarah couldn't quite put a name to. "I can't rest," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not now. Not when there's still so much to be done. I have to make it right, Sarah. I have to find a way to heal the wounds I've caused." Sarah's heart ached at the pain in his voice, at the guilt that weighed so heavily upon his soul. "John," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "you didn't cause this. You saved us, all of us. And we need you now more than ever, not just as a leader, but as a friend, as a partner in all that lies ahead." For a moment John was silent, his gaze fixed on some distant point that only he could see. Then slowly he nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're right," he said softly. I can't shake the feeling that there's something more out there, something that we haven't seen yet. And I'm afraid, Sarah, afraid of what it might mean for us, for everything we've fought so hard to protect." Sarah wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as the sun began to set over the ruins of their town. "Whatever it is," she whispered, "we'll face it together, just like we always have, just like we always will." As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, life slowly began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The town was rebuilt, the wounds of the past slowly healing as the survivors looked to the future with a newfound sense of hope and determination. But even as they celebrated their victories and mourned their losses, a shadow lingered at the edges of their world, a darkness that seemed to grow deeper with each passing day. Strange whispers began to reach their ears, rumors of anomalies and disturbances in the far reaches of the wilderness, of sightings of creatures that seemed to flicker and shift like ghosts in the night. And then, one day, a stranger arrived in town, a man with eyes that seemed to burn with an otherworldly light and a voice that echoed with the weight of ages. He spoke of a coming darkness, of a threat that lurked beyond the veil of reality, waiting to strike at the heart of all they held dear. "You must prepare," he said, his gaze fixed on John and Sarah as they listened in growing horror. "For the true enemy is not the rifts or the in-between, but something far older, far more powerful, and it will stop at nothing to claim what it desires, to remake the world in its own twisted image." John and Sarah exchanged a look of grim determination, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. They knew that they could not turn away from this new threat, that they must once again take up arms to defend their world and all that they held dear. "Tell us what we must do," John said, his voice ringing with a quiet strength that seemed to fill the room. "We will not let this darkness claim us, not without a fight." The stranger nodded, a faint smile playing across his lips. "You must seek out the lost places," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ancient ruins and forgotten temples where the secrets of the past still linger, for only there will you find the knowledge and the power to stand against the coming storm." And so, as the sun rose over the town once more, John and Sarah set out on a new journey, a quest that would take them to the far corners of the world and beyond, to the very edges of reality itself. They knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, that they might never return from the dark places they must tread, but they also knew that they had no choice, that the fate of their world and all that they loved hung in the balance. And so, with heavy hearts and unbreakable resolve, they stepped out into the unknown, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead, whatever sacrifices they might be called upon to make. For they were the guardians of the light, the protectors of all that was good and true in the world. And though the shadows might gather and the darkness press close, they would never stop fighting, never stop believing in the power of hope and love to guide them through the storm. As they disappeared into the wilderness, the town behind them slowly fading into the mist. John and Sarah knew that their true journey was only just beginning. And though the road ahead was shrouded in shadow and uncertainty, they walked forward with their heads held high, their hearts filled with the unshakable conviction that, together, they could face anything, overcome anything, and emerge victorious in the end. The journey that lay ahead of John and Sarah was one fraught with peril and uncertainty. With each step they took, they could feel the weight of their mission pressing down upon them, the fate of their world resting squarely on their shoulders. As they trekked through the dense forests and rugged mountains that surrounded their town, they remained ever vigilant, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the strange creatures that had been rumored to lurk in the wilderness. But even as they remained on guard, they could not shake the feeling that they were being watched, that some unseen presence was tracking their every move. "Do you feel it too?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as they paused to rest beneath the shade of a towering oak. "That sense of something out there, something watching us?" John nodded, his brow furrowed with concern. "I do," he said, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. "But we can't let it distract us from our mission. We have to keep moving, keep searching for the answers we need." And so they pressed on, their path taking them ever deeper into the wilderness, into the heart of the unknown. Days turned into weeks as they followed the faint trails and ancient maps that the stranger had given them, their supplies dwindling and their spirits flagging with each passing mile. But even as the journey took its toll, John and Sarah refused to give up hope. They clung to each other and to their faith in the rightness of their cause, drawing strength from the bond that had seen them through so many trials before. At last, after countless days of wandering, they stumbled upon the first of the lost places the stranger had spoken of. A crumbling ruins nestled deep in a misty valley, its walls etched with strange symbols and ancient hieroglyphs. "This is it," John breathed, his eyes wide with wonder as they stepped into the heart of the ruins. "This is where we'll find the answers we seek." But as they began to explore the ruins, they quickly realized that they were not alone. Strange figures darted through the shadows, their forms twisted and grotesque, their eyes glinting with a mad, fevered light. "What are they?" Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as one of the creatures lunged towards them, its claws outstretched and its maw gaping wide. John raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I don't know," he said, his voice grim, "but they're not getting past us." And with that, the battle was joined, John and Sarah fighting side by side against the horde of twisted creatures that poured from the ruins. They fought with all the strength and skill they possessed, their weapons flashing in the dim light as they cut down their foes one by one. But even as they fought, they could feel a strange energy pulsing through the ruins, a power that seemed to flow from the very stones themselves. It was a power that spoke of ancient secrets and forbidden knowledge, of truths that had been hidden from the world for centuries untold. As the last of the creatures fell before them, John and Sarah turned to each other, their faces streaked with sweat and their chests heaving with exertion. "We did it," Sarah panted, a grin spreading across her face. "We actually did it." But John's expression was grave, his eyes fixed on the glowing symbols that adorned the walls of the ruins. "We may have won this battle," he said, his voice low and measured, "but I fear the true war is only just beginning." And as they pressed deeper into the ruins, John's words proved all too prophetic. For with each chamber they explored and each artifact they uncovered, they could feel the power of the ancients growing stronger, the secrets of the past unfolding before them like a map to a forgotten world. But they could also sense a growing darkness on the horizon, a shadow that seemed to reach out from the very heart of the ruins themselves. It was a darkness that whispered of madness and despair, of a world consumed by chaos and ruin. "What have we unleashed?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as they stood before a pulsing portal of swirling energy, its depths filled with 1,000 screaming voices. John reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll face it together," he said, his eyes blazing with determination, "just like we always have." And with that, they stepped forward into the portal, their hearts filled with a fierce and unshakable resolve. They knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, that they might never return from the dark places they must tread. But they also knew that they had no choice, that the fate of their world and all that they loved hung in the balance. And so, with heavy hearts and unbreakable spirits, they plunged into the unknown, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead, whatever sacrifices they might be called upon to make. For they were the guardians of the light, the last hope of a world teetering on the brink of oblivion. And though the darkness might close in around them and the shadows press close, they would never stop fighting, never stop believing in the power of their love to guide them through the storm. As the portal closed behind them and the ruins faded into memory, John and Sarah knew that their true journey was only just beginning. And though the path ahead was shrouded in mystery and peril, they walked forward with their heads held high, their souls united in the unbreakable bond of their destiny. The world beyond the portal was a realm of swirling mists and shifting shadows, a place where reality itself seemed to bend and twist like a living thing. John and Sarah moved forward with cautious steps, their senses straining to penetrate the gloom that pressed in around them. But even as they pushed deeper into the heart of this strange new world, they could feel a presence watching them from the darkness, a force that seemed to pulse with an ancient and terrible power. "We're not alone here," John whispered, his hand tightening around the hilt of his weapon. "Something is out there waiting for us." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the mists for any sign of movement. "But what could it be?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What kind of creature could live in a place like this?" As if in answer to her question, a figure emerged from the shadows before them, its form cloaked in an aura of shimmering energy. It was a child, a young boy with piercing blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that seemed to absorb the light around him. "Who are you?" John demanded, his weapon leveled at the child's chest. "What do you want from us?" But the child merely smiled, his eyes sparkling with a wisdom that belied his youthful appearance. "I am the one you seek," he said, his voice echoing with a power that sent shivers down their spines. "I am the key to the destiny that awaits you." And with that, the child turned and beckoned for them to follow, his small form moving with a grace and certainty that left them breathless. John and Sarah exchanged a glance, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. But they knew that they had no choice but to follow, that the answers they sought lay somewhere beyond the veil of mist that stretched out before them. And so, with trembling steps and hearts full of trepidation, they set out after the child, their path leading them ever deeper into the heart of the unknown. As they walked, the mists began to clear, revealing a world of impossible beauty and terrifying wonder. Towering spires of crystal rose up from the ground like the fingers of giants, their surfaces pulsing with an inner light that cast a kaleidoscope of colors across the landscape. Strange creatures flitted through the air around them, their forms a dizzying array of wings and tentacles and glowing eyes. And in the distance, a great city loomed on the horizon, its walls shimmering with a power that seemed to radiate from every stone. "What is this place?" Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with amazement. "How could such a world exist hidden away from everything we've ever known?" The child smiled, his eyes glinting with a secret knowledge. "This is the birthplace of all things," he said, his voice ringing with an ancient power. "The nexus point from which all realities spring forth, the wellspring of creation itself." John shook his head, his mind reeling with the implications of the child's words. "But why bring us here?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "What is it that you want from us?" The child turned to face them, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "You are the chosen ones," he said, his voice thrumming with a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. "The guardians of the light, the protectors of all that is good and true." He gestured to the city that loomed before them, its spires glinting in the ethereal light. But a great darkness threatens to consume this place, to extinguish the light of creation and plunge all worlds into chaos and despair. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of dread settling in the pit of her stomach. "The darkness from the ruins," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "It's here, isn't it?" The child nodded, his face grave. "It is a force of pure entropy, a power that seeks to unravel the very fabric of existence itself. And it will stop at nothing to achieve its goals, to reduce all of creation to a sea of endless night." John stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Then we will stop it," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "We will fight this darkness with every ounce of strength we possess, and we will not rest until the light of creation shines forth once more." The child smiled, a glimmer of hope sparking in his ancient eyes. "Then come," he said, his hand outstretched in invitation. "Let me show you the true nature of your destiny, the role you must play in the great battle that is to come." And with that, he led them forward into the shimmering city, its streets pulsing with a power that thrummed through their very bones. John and Sarah followed, their hearts pounding with a fierce and unshakable resolve. They knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, that they might be called upon to make sacrifices beyond anything they had ever imagined. But they also knew that they had no choice, that the fate of all worlds rested upon their shoulders. And so, with heads held high and spirits unbroken, they stepped forward into the light, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead, whatever darkness might rise up to meet them. For they were the guardians of the flame, the last hope of a universe teetering on the brink of oblivion. And though the shadows might gather and the night press close, they would never stop fighting, never stop believing in the power of their love to guide them through the storm. As they followed the child deeper into the heart of the city, John and Sarah felt a sense of purpose settle over them like a mantle, a weight of responsibility that they knew they must bear with courage and resolve. And though the path ahead was shrouded in mystery and doubt, they walked forward with a fierce and unshakable faith, secure in the knowledge that they would face the coming darkness together, united in the bonds of their unbreakable love. So ends the tale of John Thorne and Sarah, the guardians of the light, as they stepped forward into the final battle for the fate of all creation. But their story lives on, a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure, to fight, and to triumph in the face of even the deepest darkness. And though the road may be long and the night may be dark, there will always be those who stand against the shadows, who carry the flame of hope and courage in their hearts. For in the end, it is not the strength of our arms or the sharpness of our blades that will see us through the storm, but the love and compassion that binds us together, the unbreakable ties of friendship and family that give us the strength to face even the darkest of nights. And so let us remember the tale of John and Sarah, the guardians of the light, and let their story be a beacon of hope for all those who struggle against the darkness, a reminder that even in the deepest shadows, there is always a glimmer of light waiting to guide us home.